Hey there, church family. It is good to talk to you. Hang on. It's good to talk to you. We're looking at Luke chapter 9, and it's a story about greatness, and how we think of greatness is going to be important as we go through this, because Jesus is going to give us a definition of what's great. So just before we get into it, I want you to just pause and think about your idea, your definition of greatness. What does it look for something to be great? For you to be great, for your life to be great. We finished a series on legacy on Sunday. For your legacy to be great, what does it look like? What does greatness look like? Most of the time, what we're going to identify with the things that we naturally fall into, kind of our default mode for greatness, is going to be defined by some element of the admiration of those around us. So the people around us, looking at something we've done, or looking at the way we've lived, or even looking at us and saying that there's greatness in that. Jesus is going to give us a little bit of a different definition. So I want to bring us back to Luke chapter 9, and it's verse 43 through 46. 46 through 48. And he's going to give us an idea. But remember the context. Jesus has now just twice predicted that he was going to die. If you think about Philippians chapter 2, it talks about the humility that believers should have. And the model of that humility is Jesus, excuse me, who emptied himself. And so that example, becoming a servant, taking on humanity, and then dying as a servant of all humanity. That's, if Jesus was great, that's a part of what greatness means in his eyes. And it's not normally what we think of. So Jesus has been predicting his death, his suffering. And an argument started among them about who was the greatest of them. So while Jesus is talking about dying for the sins of all humanity, and it's not just dying, it's suffering, and it's mockery. He's going through mockery, he's going through suffering. And the disciples are discussing who was the greatest. In their mind, as they're approaching Jerusalem, Jesus is going to stand outside the city, go in a triumphal procession into the city. He's going to go to the temple. And there he's going to finally assume the throne of David as the king and high priest of the nation of Israel. And he's going to boot out the Romans, and he's going to set the world right. And so as in every government system, there's the king, and then there are those that, as part of his court, through whom he exercises his rule and authority. The disciples are wondering, who's getting the seat closest to Jesus, who's further away from him. And so obviously the closer one and the one with more authority is their idea of what it is to be great. But Jesus, knowing their inner thoughts, took a little child and had him stand next to him. Mark, as it records this event, says Jesus took a child in his arms. Children in this time were the least respected category of people. It's not true today, not true by a long shot. But one of the realities of life back here was that oftentimes moms died in childbirth, oftentimes babies died in childbirth, and oftentimes children didn't really even, the first early months and years of a child's life were really kind of hit or miss whether or not that child was going to survive. If you think today about all the interventions that our medical community does for the health and benefit of babies, and the little problems that babies can have that today are easily fixed. Well, if you're in a pre-Enlightenment world, those problems can get really bad, and there's not really solutions for them. So babies died frequently. Little kids died frequently. And so because of that, or that's part of the equation at least, children weren't really empowered with full personhood until they had survived long enough, to put it that way. So he takes a child and he takes him in his arms and he says, whoever welcomes this child in my name welcomes me. So just pause there. You're taking the very least, the person who is empowered with the lowest definition of personhood, and he says, whoever welcomes, whoever serves, whoever loves on this person, that person is welcoming Jesus. That welcome is essentially a welcome of Jesus. And whoever welcomes me welcomes him who sent me. And it's not just of Jesus, it's of the Father himself. And then Jesus gives us a principle, whoever is least among you, this one is great. So the idea to convey, just to put it as clearly as and succinctly as I can, greatness doesn't exist in the admiration of the world. Greatness exists in the appropriate welcome of the least, of those who are overlooked. And it's not just the appropriate welcome of them, but it's somebody who sees the world as God sees them. And so it sees the person who is oppressed, or the person who is little cared for, the person who is overlooked, little accounted for. And it sees that person the way God sees that person, as worth the death of his very own son, and determines to treat that person in such a way, to see Jesus in them and to love Jesus by loving them, and to love the Father by loving them. So as we think about greatness, to serve that person, greatness in God's eyes is not about having a specific title. It's not about the seats of honor, as he'll talk about in other places. It's not about all of these things that we and our world commonly equates with greatness. What greatness is about is about seeing people and loving people the way Jesus does, especially those that are so easy to overlook and so easy to miss. So anyway, that's all we're going to cover, just these 3 verses today. This idea of defining greatness and defining the great life for whoever is least among you, whoever takes it upon himself to serve the most unservable, the most overlooked, that person, that's where greatness lies, to serve them. All right, guys, interesting concepts and convicting and good to think about. But anyway, we'll see you next week.